Hey guys, it's Dan Adams from Redeemer Church. I want to, in light of the fact that this is Passion Week and Resurrection Sunday is coming, I wanted to take a little bit of time and do some shorter devotionals or sermonettes, if you will, from Matthew 26 and 27. So 3 different things going to be doing. This will be the first one on the Last Supper. So we'll be doing the Last Supper, Gethsemane, and the crucifixion. So today I want to read from Matthew 26, beginning in verse 17 on the Last Supper. So Matthew 26, beginning in verse 17. Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" Jesus said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand, and I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' And the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, 'Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me.' And they were very sorrowful and began to say to one another, or one after another, 'Is it I, Lord?' He answered, 'He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born.' Judas, who would betray him, answered, 'Is it I, Rabbi?' He said to him, 'You have said so.' Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, and he gave it to the disciples, and he said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.' And then he took a cup when he had given thanks, and he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom.'" So this is leading up to Jesus' arrest and his mock trial and his crucifixion. So this is the Last Supper that he's going to eat with the disciples, but it's also the institution of the Lord's Supper that we partake of. In verse 17 it says, "Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus." So they were partaking of the Passover that was instituted in the book of Exodus. God commanded his people to celebrate unleavened bread and Passover. Unleavened bread was a week of eating unleavened bread in the homes, because when Israel was brought out of Egypt, they didn't have time to let the bread, put yeast into the bread and to let it to rise. And so they ate unleavened bread. So during the Passover, they eat unleavened bread as well. So that's what's going on here. And so Jesus is telling his disciples to make ready a room for them to be able to celebrate the Passover together. So it's in the context of the Passover meal that Jesus takes some bread and he breaks it and he says, "This is my body." And then he takes a cup and he says, "Drink of it. This is the new covenant in my blood." And so in Luke's gospel, Jesus tells them to do this in remembrance of him. And so this is why we as the church don't celebrate Passover, because Passover foreshadowed this new covenant meal. So it's popular right now in some Christian circles, and I guess it always has been, for people to kind of think, man, it'd be really cool. Let's, like right before Easter, let's celebrate Passover, and people like to do a Seder meal. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing this meal every once in a while, because it's part of our history and the Old Testament and that sort of thing. But listen, the person who continually wants to participate in Passover is likened to a 16-year-old who continually wants to ride a tricycle. You know, it's cute that you ride a tricycle every now and then. If you're 16, that's cool. But if you want to do that all the time, It's problematic. See, the Passover foreshadowed something far greater. Jesus is our Passover lamb who has been sacrificed for us. The Passover was a picture that just as God had delivered his people out of Egypt and provided for them and taken them through the Red Sea and conquered the Pharaoh and the Egyptians in the water, just in a very similar manner, God has redeemed his people by blood. In the Passover, and a lamb is sacrificed and blood is placed on the lintels of the door. And this is a way of saying that this lamb has been sacrificed in your stead so that your firstborn sons are not killed. And so Jesus has been sacrificed on our behalf. And so what I'm saying is this, is that yes, we should appreciate the Passover, but we're not continually celebrating the Passover anymore. We're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, and we're celebrating his life and remembering him by celebrating the Lord's Supper. And so the Christ is our new Passover, if you will. And so in this event, Jesus is explaining that to his disciples, and he's giving them an ordinance that's going to be redone many, many times. So a lot of churches celebrate the Lord's Supper every single Sunday. We do it often. We don't do it every single Sunday, but we do it at least a couple of times a month. So Jesus is giving this ordinance to continue. And so in the breaking of the bread, we're remembering that Jesus has died for us. We're remembering his life and his body and his death. In the drinking of the cup of juice or the cup of wine, we're thinking about the fact that Jesus poured out his life's blood to cleanse us from sin and to redeem us. And so we should be thinking about that. It's not that we've been released from slavery in Egypt, but we've been released from the bondage of sin and the bondage of self and the bondage of the devil. So we've been released from slavery. The Lord's Supper is communicating to us that we've been delivered by virtue of Christ. In the Lord's Supper, we're thinking about his blood that cleanses us. In the Lord's Supper, we're thinking that Jesus is our substitute. And in the Lord's Supper, we have an object meal that is reminding us of Jesus over and over again. So in the Passion Week, Jesus instituted this Lord's Supper. It was the last meal that he had with the disciples before his arrest. And so this is leading up to his crucifixion and leading up to his resurrection. I wanted us to take some time to ponder this this week before we preached the resurrection. So I hope that you'll read Matthew 26 and dwell on this with your family and contemplate this meal and contemplate Jesus is the greater Passover. Jesus is the greater sacrificial lamb. The Lord's Supper is the greater meal than the Passover meal. The Lord's Supper is the thing, and Passover just simply was a foreshadowing of the real event. So the real event is Jesus and the supper. The Passover is a leading up to that. So let's get that right. Let's get that right. Blessings to you.